Hillary Clinton is pivoting from running against Donald Trump to running for a Democratic Senate, but Donald Trump says, not so fast. I'm winning. That's what he says. Here to discuss is Jon Meacham, a historian, journalist, and the author of Destiny and Power, The American Odyssey of George Herbert Walker Bush, and Mark McKinnon, the co-creator of Showtime's The Circus and a former campaign advisor to John McCain and George W. Bush. I'm so lucky to have both of you here. Little joke in the break. I feel like this is Evening Dawn having both of you on. For those of you, some of you may get that. Anyway, Donald Trump sounds optimistic about the race. Here he is in Florida today.
I actually think we're winning. We're up in Ohio. We're up in Iowa. We're doing great in North Carolina. I think we're doing great in Florida. I think we're going to win Florida big. I think we're going to win Florida big.
So, Mark, does he know something we don't know?
No, what he probably knows is he's losing, but at least he's aware of the fact that he needs to be looking confident and sounding confident. The problem is that he obsesses about the polls. So in the primaries, all he did was talk about the polls, and he hasn't quit doing that. He's got to, but he must be and should be giving his voters the impression that he's going to win.
But how do you on one hand say we're doing well in this and this and this, and then say, but the polls are all phony? And they're rigged?
Just stop talking about the polls. Don't talk about them. I mean, just talk about your message. Talk about what people are responding to. Talk about your trade, your jobs message. That's his winning message. That's how we got here. Don't talk about the polls.
You want to say anything about that, John?
Well, I don't know why we would suddenly expect this to become a conventional October, since it's been a wildly unconventional 18 months. Mark's right. I mean, ultimately, to use the cliche or the vernacular, he would be making his closing argument. He'd be dealing with the message. He'd be driving it home. But this is not in any way fit any historical pattern, any conventional pattern. Mark has worked in politics. I've read a lot about it. And this is just something that's sui generis.
So listen, John, let's talk about Hillary Clinton now, because in the meantime, as we saw her out on the campaign trail today, moving her focus down to down ballot races, does that mean that she thinks her campaign is, she has this election in the bag?
I don't know if she thinks she has it in the bag, but she's thinking about governing. She's clearly, Mr. Trump may not believe the polls. I suspect Secretary Clinton does. I'm reminded of an old joke, I think is attributed to Bob Dole, that he doesn't believe polls unless he's ahead, which is sort of human nature, I guess. But I think that she's trying to get as much of a wave as she can, because she knows, because she's been to this movie before, that it's really hard once you get there to get things done.
Yeah. So, Mark, we've been talking a lot. You've been on the show. I want to put up this poll and discuss it. This is a new CNN ORC poll today. It's out. It shows Hillary Clinton leading, but it's not a blowout. It's not a blowout. Here's something that surprised me. More and more Democratic voters are saying that they are voting for Clinton, not against Donald Trump, at 69%. They say they're voting to support Clinton compared to 59% who are voting to support Donald Trump. Does this go against that conventional wisdom that people may be holding their nose to vote for Hillary Clinton, and that they're actually enthusiastic about going out to vote for her?
That's a really good sign for her. I mean, what you really want is to close that enthusiasm gap, and that may be in part because people are starting to believe that she's going to win. And I think it's also very helpful that she has such a strong surrogate team like the Obamas out there and Bernie Sanders, and encouraging and exciting that coalition, the millennials. And I think that that's showing up in those numbers.
Even Kellyanne Conway said that, she couldn't have better surrogates out for her. She said that this weekend.
Their surrogates are Hall of Fame MVPs.
But does this show that, maybe her supporters are more enthusiastic about Donald Trump? Because that has not been what people have been saying.
Well, they're both. I think they're
59 to 60.
They're animated by the thought of a Donald Trump presidency, but now they're getting a positive message and the notion that Hillary Clinton might win. And so it's a great opportunity for her to close on a really optimistic high note.
Okay. John, President Obama is out on the campaign trail pounding Republican candidates. Listen to this.
If the world that they've been seeing is that I'm powerful enough to cause hurricanes on my own and to steal everybody's guns in the middle of the night and impose martial law, even though I can't talk without a prompter, then is it any wonder that they end up nominating somebody like Donald Trump? Donald Trump didn't start it. He just did what he always did, which is slap his name on it, take credit for it, and promote it.
He is really enjoying this. You said
he is having
he's all fired up and ready
time.
to go.
Yeah. Did you say this was Revenge of the Birthers?
Yes. I mean, he is, I think, thinking about the guy who almost ended his presidency, or certainly made his presidency difficult from the very beginning, because for half the country, or a good number of Republicans and conservatives out there, they didn't even give him credibility as being an American-born citizen or a legitimate president. So it really handicapped his presidency. So this is not only an opportunity for Clinton to win, but to get back at the guy that really, in many ways, handicapped how he got off to a start.
John,
I think,
go ahead,
and I think
John.
we can clearly say that some two-term presidents have a little senioritis. This guy's never had so much fun. He's just out there beer-bonging rhetoric. So this is phenomenal.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Recently there was this Bloomberg poll and asked Republicans who better matches your view of what the Republican Party should stand for, Donald Trump or Paul Ryan. The majority of Republicans say Trump. So what does that mean for the Republican Party looking ahead, Jon Meacham?
It's a terrific question. I mean, this is I've said this before, but the movement in 25 years from George H.W. Bush to Donald Trump disproves Darwin. And we've got this situation now where you have a Republican base, and to me the question for the Republican Party is going to be how much of this is the Republican base and how much of this is a Trump base. And history is about the history of politics is about personality-driven leadership. So as you both know, there's a great autopsy written about what the Republican Party has to do to win. But it's 4 years old, and it's sitting on a shelf. And if there's not someone, and it may be Paul Ryan, I suspect it's going to be somebody whose name we haven't said recently. Somebody's got to come to lead them out of the wilderness, and it's got to be a person. It can't just be an idea.
Interesting. I don't know if you guys saw the first installment of Trump TV tonight. That's what it's being called, at least. We'll discuss that right after the break. Donald Trump's campaign went on Facebook tonight to launch a nightly newscast for Trumpsters by Trumpsters, Facebook Live, by the way, saying they were excited to bypass what they call the left-wing media. Back with me now, Jon Meacham and Mark McKinnon. Interesting, because the left-wing media, according to them, played a big role in giving him a voice, right? I want you to listen to what Donald Trump said earlier today.
The media isn't just against me. They're against all of you. That's really what they're against. They're not against me. They're against what we represent. Like Hillary Clinton, they look down on the hardworking people of the country. And that's what's happened.
Jon Meacham, that goes right to the heart of Trump's appeal, and he definitely struck a chord with voters. Is this attitude going to outlast the election?
This attitude is, absolutely. It's outlasted George Wallace, who was really one of the first to use it effectively. This is part of classic modern populism, where you argue that every institution in American life has power over the common person, and the common person is subject to forces beyond their control. Enter a champion who's going to give them a key to unlock that conspiracy and return power to them. And the idea of a left-wing media has been a trope on the right for well over 50 years. It used to just be CBS, now it's everybody. And I think that one of the great questions from November 9th forward, I think less so than whether Trump's going to sue in various states about the results, is going to be what is the form his permanent opposition takes. Is this media? Is it just going to be him and his Twitter account calling into shows? What is the scale he's going to take this to? Because I don't think he's going away.
Mark, I want you to talk about that, but maybe we got a clue, because I want you to take a look at this. This is the Trump campaign taking to Facebook tonight with a live post that sure looks a lot like a model for Trump TV. Anyway, here it is.
Hi, Facebook. It's Tommy Lahren here, delivering you some live final thoughts. Now, we're getting so close to the election right now, it's down to the wire, and it's more important than ever. The mainstream media isn't going to hand this one to us. The Democrats surely are not going to hand it to us, and the Never-Trumpers are doing everything they can to make sure that they're not going to hand this one to us. So it's really up to us. It's up to the American voter. It's up to the deplorables, as Hillary would call us. It's time to get out of her basket and make our voices heard.
All right, so she's from The Blaze, but that's Tommy Lahren, I think that's her name, on Trump's Facebook live post. What do you think of that, Mark?
Well, I mean, in terms of what it's an impact before the election, it's a channel directed at the supporters he's already got. So it's not going to be helpful in terms of expanding his base, which is what he needs to do to win the election. On the other hand, it's sending a message to this a significant group of voters who are going to be around after the election, who aren't going to be any happier. In fact, they're going to be a lot angrier. And it's a huge constituency. And so, to Meacham's point, I mean, they're sitting out there, and something's going to happen with them. And I think it has already divided the Republican Party in two distinct different parties, and it's hard to see how that's going to heal very quickly.
I want to ask you, John, what happens to the Republican Party, but before I do, because you recently reported on an interesting bit of history, a 1988 diary entry from George H.W. Bush, that Donald Trump was interested in the vice presidential spot on this ticket. Did President Bush take that idea seriously?
He heard about this from Lee Atwater, who had had talks with Trump. And the diary entry is, in Bush's voice, strange, unbelievable. So no, I think it's safe to say. And then he promptly forgot about it. I actually reminded him of it after I came across it in the diary, and he was surprised to hear it.
But, so what does that say about the history of the Republican Party then, that Donald Trump has gone from, unlike, like, you're not going to get the VP prospect at all, to the presidential candidate?
Well, it's a rise. It's this rise of populism, and it's cultural and it's economic. And the movement from George H.W. Bush, who was one of the most qualified people to ever run for president, to Trump, is a sign that the party itself, it seems to me, has to figure out how are they going to incentivize experience, how are they going to return to a place where candidates like Jeb Bush, who ran, are going to be rewarded for being good at politics as we know them. And in this year, being good at politics as we know them, being good at governance, was the kiss of death. Mm-hmm. And so it seems to me that what the Republican Party has to figure out is not only what they stand for, but are they really happy with these splashy populist moments that burn very brightly but don't actually lead to victory at the polls.
Here is a clip from The Circus, Mr. McKinnon's show on Showtime.
Podesta says that they've taken on a lot of water, and he says most of that has to do with terrible decisions made pre-campaign, but a lot has to do with her instincts. Whoa. And then Nira writes back, almost no one knows better than me that her instincts can be terrible.
Wow. Did that create any issues for you guys as reporters that it seemed strategically leaked?
Yeah. I think every indication is that both of these hacks are stolen material. On the other hand, they're undeniably newsworthy.
I have to say I love the hat, by the way. But listen, we have covered the contents of the WikiLeaks email. The Trump campaign surrogates always bring them up, but the candidate frequently goes off message. Has Donald Trump missed an opportunity here?
Absolutely, and there was an opportunity at that debate to talk about this issue. Our show last night on Showtime, The Circus, spent the whole episode talking about WikiLeaks. I mean, there's a really interesting history about Julian Assange, about the Russian involvement. We've heard people kind of talking about it in the news, but it's a really interesting to kind of dig down and find out exactly what's going on. But a couple of quick conclusions about that. One is that there's no question that Julian Assange wants to go after Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. And number two, there's no question that it's the Russians that are involved. Now, I'm not saying there's collusion between Assange and the Russians, but it's an open source link that he provides, and the Russians' fingerprints are all over this thing. Now, the other thing I'd say about that is that there's been a ton of emails out there. The Washington Post reporters were just talking about it. It's Trump keeps saying, and the Trump people saying that the media aren't paying enough attention to it. That may be true, but on the other hand, their candidate isn't focusing and staying on message on that issue. Right. And so the media is going to cover what he says, no matter what he says. But if he goes off changing, on all these other tangents, that's what they're going to cover.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
See you guys soon. 15 days. 15 days.
Thank God.
All right.